Hi, Louise here from Boost Your Career, and welcome to another episode of Boost Talk. And today I've been chatting with Mandy Hughes, who is the founder and director of Accelerate Impact. It's a consulting business that allows her to indulge in her passion of supporting people around their careers and to create lasting impact. We spent a fabulous half hour talking about curious and candid and what that means in the workplace and how women can use both of those to explore possibilities and to enhance their impact in the workplace. We even touched on the difference between kind and nice, that whole concept of nice girls don't get the corner office. So enjoy the conversation, have a listen, like, comment, and we'll see you over on boostyourcareer.com.au. Hi everyone, Louise here and welcome to another episode of Boost Talk. Today we're speaking with Mandy Hughes, yay, who's from Accelerate Impact, founder and director. And I think a lot about you, Mandy, is in the title of your business because Accelerate Impact is exactly what Mandy loves to do. That's her passion, to support people reach their goals and to create a lasting impact. So welcome, Mandy.
Thank you so much, Louise. So lovely to see you.
Oh, it's fun. I love these conversations. I get to talk with people.
Sounds fun. Looking forward to every moment of this, Louise.
Excellent. Well, we've got a huge topic today. I mean, seriously.
We do.
We've called it Curious and Candid, and we've put a little byline on it that says why nice just doesn't cut it in the modern workplace. And funnily enough, I had just this conversation yesterday with some women. I was having lunch with Mandy, and I was thinking, and I said, oh gosh, we should all be on that call tomorrow because that's exactly what I'm going to talk with Mandy about.
It comes up often, this concept of nice. It really does, yes.
And I know you have what can only be described as a passion for curiosity. And I'd love you to perhaps explain how you see curiosity working in the workplace, in the professional setting, and how do you see that as relevant to women's career journeys?
What fabulous questions. And you're right, I absolutely have an out-and-out passion for curiosity. But I think a really interesting point to start is what do we even mean when we say curious?
Yeah.
And look, for me, curiosity isn't really about a search for facts. It's about searching for possibilities.
Oh, nice.
So from that perspective, I see it as more of a mindset. So I find when I engage in a curious mindset, things open up for me. And when I reflect back on my career, some of the pivotal moments for me have actually been when I've engaged with curiosity rather than certainty. And I think what that looks like is it just allows you to be in the moment, be really present, really with the person. So in the relationship you're in the meeting that you're in the one-on-one, and really start to think about what could be. And I think when you come from that perspective, it enables you to ask really great questions. So things like collaboration, innovation becomes so much easier. And I also think of curiosity is kind of a twofold, isn't it? There's this internal curiosity about the questions you ask of yourself. What could be, what are the possibilities here? But also the energy you put out into the room. So this external curiosity, when you're inviting people to engage and you're engaging with them in a curious space. So for me, I think the possibilities of a curious mindset are pretty much endless.
Wow. That was really beautiful, And the more I listened to you then, the more I was thinking, that's a neat, easy way to explain mindfulness to people or remaining present. And I'd never thought about those terms correlated with curiosity.
It's an interesting one, particularly that last bit that you talked about being present. One of my traits is I think fast, I talk fast, I move fast. I love ideas. I love, and I get what I call a butterfly mind. I like moving from one bright, shiny topic to another.
I love you so much.
Maybe. It's very much mutual. But for me, what I found about curiosity, it was the thread that held that together. So exploring ideas with people. Yeah. And I think when you're engaging with somebody, if you're actually with them by asking curious questions, that engagement's deepened because you're actually interested in what they have to say. And you're interested not in just listening to respond or listening till it's your turn to speak and put your own ideas over, but you're listening for what they're saying to you and what that could be. And I found particularly, look, I'm a fairly softly spoken person. I very much identify as a raging introvert. And I come from a background of big power meetings where lots of voices, lots of talking around the table. And rather than try to emulate, what I found in my career has been useful is using my curiosity to ask those questions, to listen and engage. And when I'm with the people in the room, to ask a curious question. And what it's really enabled me to do is play where I like to play, which is innovation and ideas, but also it helps move things along. It helps you have deep connections with the people in the room because it demonstrates a genuine interest and care for what they're saying, but it also moves things forward. And plus, it's kind of fun, to be honest with you.
You make it sound really simple though, Mandy. And I was reflecting then that, I make choices to ask curious questions. My brain was going, the conversations that we have in Boost are often around, how do I do that? How do I make myself heard or choose to be heard in those power meetings that you just mentioned? Do you have some tips around that? Like, how do you ask that curious question? And how then, if you are a raging introvert, how do I then manage myself so that I can speak up and speak out?
Yeah, oh, such good questions. And I think there are probably three questions in that. And I'll try
At
and take them
least,
one at a
yeah.
time. But
At
Louise,
least,
if I miss one, grab me back in. So I'll go backwards. So the first one was around how do you lean in as an introvert into those conversations that often feel a little bit like a carousel that's zooming around and you've got to find your space to jump on. And I loved it, the saying around introverts, extroverts. So introverts think to speak and extroverts speak to think. So that often means that we need that little bit extra time. And for me, that works beautifully because I like to absorb what's happening in the room and I start thinking about the possibilities. And I'm a huge fan of what I call signposting. So what I do is when I'm ready to ask the question and I find the thread that I can pull to be useful and to add something to the meeting, I'll often start with something like, look, I'm finding myself curious. I'm wondering if we're going into this area. So I preface it with what I call a pause and a transition, because sometimes people need the time, particularly if they've been flowing ideas, lots of people talking, sometimes all at once or in rapid succession. Sometimes you just need to create that space of calm to go, there's some incredible things happening here. What I'm curious about is. And then that way you're kind of signposting that you want to take the attention and you want to direct it to an area that you find useful or fruitful. And what I've found is just a handful of really good questions. You can repeat them. What I'm curious about, I find myself wondering. The thing I really love about it, curiosity is an incredibly useful antidote when power comes into play.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about power, and oftentimes when you're not the most powerful person around the table, but you have the most, not to contribute, but you have clear ideas and an area where it's valuable for you to speak and to lean in. Because power sometimes is positional. It's not necessarily about the person with the best idea around the table.
Yeah.
It's really around creating the space where this has the opportunity to thrive. So you're trying to plant your little seeds in fertile ground. And I often find is when that's happening is sometimes people can be a little dismissive of ideas. It's giving the curiosity or the invitation to curiosity to the other person. It's okay. Oh, I can understand that maybe this idea is not landing for you right now, but can I ask what within the idea has merit for you? Or what within the idea is holding you back? So you're inviting curiosity in, because I think curiosity can be a real two-way street. So I like to put it into the room, but also if I'm sensing that things are kind of drifting or that we're not spending the time on an idea or a person that we should be, is inviting that curiosity. Is okay, this is what I'm wondering. What would it take for this to be an idea that has merit for you? Or what would it take for this to move forward? And really inviting people to pause and think. So I think one of the biggest things that we don't necessarily do is take that time to pause. So you talk about mindfulness, that being still in the moment. In a professional setting, we often don't do that. But there's no reason why we can't create spaces where a pause and a reflection is actually happening as we're in the moment, particularly in industries that move very, very fast.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, because the second part of your question was asking about specifically for women in their careers and moving forward. And I think personally, coming up sort of in the 90s and the millennium, there was an often tendency, particularly amongst sort of my peer group, to emulate
Yeah.
the leadership styles that were prevalent, which inherently, because of the history of workplace, have often been fairly dominant or masculine styles. And not in any way to suggest there's anything wrong with that. But if it's your authentic style, that's wonderful. But if it's not, emulation doesn't allow you the freedom to be in the moment and to move. And one of the things I found really great around curiosity is it allows you to be your authentic self because you're inviting perspective and idea or possibility. You're not trying to command and control. You're not trying to have all the answers. And it frees you up to be authentic. And if your sparkle and your passion is around ideas and innovation, it allows you to do that. So it creates value and worth in a way that is uniquely yours.
Mm.
And that's what I find incredibly valuable about it. I'm not an extrovert. I will never be the loudest person in the room, but I don't want to be. I find different ways to add value. And circling right back to what you started with about the name of my business, Accelerate Impact, something I'm really passionate about is impact doesn't have to be noise and loud and
No.
dominant. It's cut through,
Mm.
creating those moments where something happens because you've made a genuine connection.
Mm.
And for me, that's what curiosity is.
Oh, creating the pause, not
Yep.
just for self, but for other people. And the other part that captured my thinking then was I might seem as if I'm sitting back. It's not that I'm being silent, it's that I am choosing to find that thread that will allow me to add value. That's a beautiful sentiment, and it's a really solid way that women in particular can. You talked about innate male strengths. Well, they can play to their innate female strengths in that instance, because women want to make the connections. They want to pull on those threads. They have an innate strength around the relationship and the conversation. So it can create a very solid power base for women simply through a mindset of curiosity. Wow,
Absolutely.
that's
I
beautiful.
completely agree. I love that you love it. The other thing for me, this is because I know that you and I have talked so many times in the past around as women who maybe further down our careers than some others, and the role of reaching back and supporting those that come after us, or even the peers that are around us that may not be in the environment that they find nurturing. I think a really big part of this is creating the space and the precedent where thoughtful comment, where curiosity is a strength, and
Yeah.
inviting that to be a way of working. Invite, because not all introverts are female.
Yeah.
There are other people around the table that, for whatever reason, would value and thrive in
Mm.
spaces where we create the space to be curious. And I think a big part of that for me is making this a normal part of working, so that
Yeah.
this is how
And
meetings,
making it a strength.
it's a
Yeah.
strength. It is
Yeah.
sitting back and reflecting is incredibly powerful.
Mm.
Yes, there's power in advocacy, but there's power in curiosity and inquiring as well. And I
Yeah.
think it's undervalued.
I think absolutely there is a complete disregard for the power of reflection. It's quite remarkable because how else do we move forward if we're not reflecting, breathing, and making that connection and particularly allowing women? What you're suggesting is that as a female at a very noisy male table, as an introvert at a female at a very noisy male table, I can create a quiet strength, a quiet power that can cut through the noise and provide the pause for other people. That's
Yeah.
rather beautiful, isn't it? I love it.
It absolutely is, and I have to be honest. Some of the tables I've been at that are very noisy,
Yeah.
all genders, really, all genders. I often tend to be the most introverted, the introverts in the room, and
Yeah.
I think another part of that is such a strong misunderstanding about what introversion is. It in no
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
signals a shyness or a lack of confidence.
No, not at all. It's about energy.
It is absolutely about energy and reflection.
Yeah.
And I've built a lot of my career on my ability to innovate and make connections and ideas and move things forward. So for me, it's been a quiet strength, and I'm loving that people are really started to connect with the power
Mm.
of curiosity.
Yeah.
It,
And the
it,
curious question set that goes with it. I love that you said you can have 3 or 4 that
yep,
are yours that you use, and you can just keep repeating them. The problem is, I think people think, oh, that's not a very good question. Once you've heard a great question, take note of it, use it yourself.
100%. I heard one, oh gosh, 8, 9 years ago now, and I've stolen it shamelessly because it was wonderful. And I was pitching an idea to somebody, and what they said to me was, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
I thought, wonderful. They're inviting me to come in and explore their thinking with them. I loved it. So it wasn't
Very
oh,
open.
no, you need to come back when you've done more.
Yeah.
It was an invitation for curiosity. And I thought that was just marvelous. I loved it.
Of course, at that point, you know, a lot of young women will have the thought and then not act. So I'd like to add in that at that point, take that breath
Yeah.
and ask that question and make that connection. And that can be the fear piece. That can be the piece that's holding you back. The poison can be the fear, but the antidote's the self-love. It's, of course, I'm able to operate this way because it will work. It will allow that conversation. They're fabulous, fabulous signposts that you have handed to people. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about.
I know, mine too. We could go for hours, I know, but we
Good.
won't. We will contain ourselves. The other part of this that I'm, as you know, I'm always interested in this one. This whole concept of remaining kind, not nice. And
Yes.
even came up yesterday in conversation,
Yep.
and it was actually my sister, and she just
Yep.
looked at me and she said, but you have to be nice. And I said, yeah, I think what's happened is we're a bit skewed on what it is. So I'd
Yeah.
love to hear your views on kind, not nice.
Sure. The N word, the nice word, has followed me around
I
my
always want to
career.
do this. I always want to give air quotes nice.
I have been called nice more times than I ever care to count. And originally, I always felt it was a little bit damning with faint praise. I thought, oh gosh, am I nice? And I thought, well, what about holding people accountable? And what about having these candid conversations? I do that. And what I realized, I think there's a real, to your point, there's a real misunderstanding about the difference between nice and kind. And I think they are absolutely distinct. So when we think about nice, we're oftentimes coming from a position of what supports us. People like to be liked. So to be seen as nice, to be seen as helpful, is about our own self-image. I feel this is purely my perspective. Um, Being kind is different. Being kind is in service of the other person. And for me, that's where the distinction comes in.
Yeah.
So if somebody said to me, I'm kind, I'd take that as much more of a compliment than being nice. Because
Yeah.
I think sometimes being kind is actually being what the person needs you to be. So if you think about, when I talk about accountability, sometimes the kindest, best thing you can do for a person is to open them up to a perspective that perhaps they weren't aware of. So particularly when you think about things like giving feedback, it seems to be feedback quarter. This quarter, I'm doing lots and lots of feedback workshops. And a big thing that comes up every time is this idea about how stressful and anxiety inducing it is to give
I
feedback.
know.
And we know that's true, but that doesn't mean it's not incredibly valuable. And I think, and again, I think curiosity has a role here. If you approach giving feedback to an individual around an invitation to be curious together, around something that you've seen, either something they're doing incredibly well and they'd love to explore, so that they know they're doing it really well, because oftentimes people don't necessarily know why they're so
Yep.
good at what they are,
Yep.
and where could they apply this. Or if something's not quite as you know the person would want it to be, or as the organization or the role needs it to be, and inviting people to lean in and be curious around what's getting in the way. Because I think a big part of it is thinking that being honest or being candid with people is to be unkind, is to not be nice. And I think the reality is helping people help themselves is one of the greatest kindnesses that you can actually do.
Mm,
And to do that with compassion and an invitation for curiosity, because it's about intent, I feel, giving people what they need, what is useful for them to support what they want to do, where they want to go, and invite people to step in and be curious with you, I think is kind, because you're not serving yourself, you're serving them. And for
mm.
me, that's the biggest distinction between nice and kind. Still not a huge fan of the word nice. And that whole if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I think that's
What
led
did
us down the wrong path for a very long time.
Lois Frankel, long time ago, 80s? Nice girls don't get the corner office. Um,
Because I don't see the opposite of nice being nasty.
no,
I
but
just
it's
think I
kind.
just think
I'm with you.
yeah,
I'm agreeing with you,
yeah,
but so was she.
yeah,
It's
absolutely,
it's
yeah,
that nice can often be seen as doormat, can be seen as you being laying yourself down and allowing others to walk over. Whereas kind,
yes,
I love your in service of another. You can't do that unless you're presenting yourself in a strong way. Like that just won't happen. So I
absolutely.
get that distinction between kind and nice. I think they're wonderful distinctions, and they're. Do you know? I'm just listening to you then, and I'm thinking, well, in this new, post-pandemic hybrid workplace, that whole notion of kind is incredibly important. I mean, you used the word authentic a while back, and we sort of glossed over that. All of this is around that if I am kind, I am being authentic. Just because I have to give a serious message doesn't mean I can't do that in a way that isn't kind, that doesn't support your growth, which then comes back to
Absolutely.
curiosity, doesn't it?
It really does. I see them as so interconnected. And I think
Yeah.
it's about the spirit in which you do things, the intent.
Intent's really important, isn't it? And that
Absolutely.
whole
Yeah.
that's, that wasn't my intent, people say a lot, and my brain always goes, then how is that happening? So what language were you using? What words did you choose? What was the tone that you applied to that? And if that's happening to you regularly, isn't it time to reflect on how
Absolutely.
how you are
Absolutely.
impacting others?
Absolutely. I mean, maybe step back and go, what actually is my intent here? And
No.
what or who am I in service of?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I talk about boost, the language around boost your career. It's about enhancing personal impact, um,
Yeah.
because that's what it is. It's about you and how you present self and how you engage with others. And what we're hearing from you is that if we're curious and if we're candid around that, we'll be coming from a position of kind because we're seeking possibilities. So we're
Yeah.
looking to
Absolutely.
expand rather than contract. It's a really beautiful way of talking about it, Mandy. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, and I think it fits beautifully with Boost because that's what it
Yeah, it
is.
does.
You
Yeah.
already have what you need. It's just about elevating, boosting that.
Exactly, and
There.
understanding how that can happen. And I suppose that's a really good question then. So curious and candid are obviously, for me, obviously relevant skills um, now in the modern leadership world. How do you see that strategies for women? How do you see them playing out so that they can work on their being candid and being curious? And is there a little boost that you could give people around being curious, being candid?
Absolutely. So for me, when you talked about it earlier about this concept of reflection,
Yeah.
and I think it's about finding a person you can reflect with, share ideas. We talk
Okay.
often about mentors around somebody that can help you walk down a path that's already worn and share an experience. But I love to see mentors as somebody that you can be curious with. So when
Yeah.
you think about strategies, have somebody that you can play your ideas with, to be curious with, to think about this is a situation I'm in and I'm curious about the possibilities. Where could I go? So I think sometimes having this element of deliberation in what you're trying to achieve and trying to cause, either in your immediate role, in your next role, and really being mindful around what strengths you want to put in.
Yeah.
And also own in your authentic strengths, because I think there's this concept of imposter syndrome. I hear it come up time and time again. And I think sometimes working with another trusted advisor around, this is what I think I'm good at. What do you see? This is the strategy I want to take in this particular situation or this project. What could I do? And I think that's back to that concept of internal curiosity, the questions you ask yourself. So some of the questions I find useful there when I'm thinking about strategizing and actually trying to do the best I can in a situation, the questions, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? If this doesn't work, then what else could I try? So this idea about forward momentum. So when you talk about a strategy, for me, it's around creating networks and allies and this sense of forward momentum. And it also kind of moves you away from the idea of its success or progression is binary, because I don't believe it is. We get our biggest growth and boosts when we play on the edges of something that we're not quite sure on yet. That sense of empowerment.
Yep.
And I think going into that with a strategy of, I'm going to learn and grow here. I'm going to be curious about what could be, and I'm going to invite people with me. That takes away some of the fear of failure, but it also brings people in and to engage with you. And what better strategy to create strong supportive network for women emerging through their careers, to have that network of people who want to engage with you, who want to see what you can do. And for me, I think that's incredibly powerful.
Me too. I can't get intent, impact. They are crucial to any conversation. And I hadn't anticipated when we first set up the topic today that talking about being curious and candid would lead to intent and impact again. But it does.
It really does.
So,
It really does.
Women often aren't intentional enough in their professional workplaces. A lot of things happen around and to without women finding that power stance in the middle of it and making choices around intent. Your language is just beautiful, Mandy. Thank you.
Yeah, what a lovely thing to say.
Your ability to you say quietly support, and yes, your ability to quietly support and enhance is remarkable. And I love the search for possibilities, curiosity being the antidote to power. That's pretty cool. I've taken quite a few notes here. I'll talk to you about them afterwards. But I think finding mentors, someone you can be curious with, creating that forward momentum. These are wonderful, wonderful things and tips to be passing on to our female listeners. So on behalf of them, thank you so much for your time today. And will you come back?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for letting me talk at length about one of my favorite topics. So thank you, Louise.
Wasn't enough time, and it's never enough time. I know that. But it's enough to pique interest, and we can pick this up and come back to the nuggets. So, Mandy Hughes, thank you so much for joining us today.
Most welcome.
Hello, Louise Phelan here, and you've been listening to yet another Boost Talk, and I know you loved it. These women are being so generous with their time and their experience and their expertise, and it's great to have their perspective on their career enhancement strategies for women in this post-pandemic hybrid workplace that we find ourselves in. So for more information, head on over to our website, boostyourcareer.com.au, and I'll see you there.